What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Fuzed Life podcast. Today's guest is a former street cop, military vet, and host of the Vanguard Wall Podcast, Schuler. Asher, what's up, dude?
Hey man, thanks for having me on. I've been watching you guys for a while, man. I've learned a lot from your podcast, and obviously, you and I've been friends for a while, so it's really cool to see kind of where you are and where you've come from, man. So congrats, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. It's great to have you on. Like I said, we've been friends for a while. I haven't seen you in years. We've hooked up on the phone here and there, but it's really good to catch up and let you tell your story, man. So first thing I want to jump into is let you actually I gave a general kind of introduction, but if you want to go over your experience a little bit more, I'd appreciate that for the viewers.
Yeah, so I did 22 years in the military, both in active duty and the reserves. Did a couple combat deployments. My last probably 12 or 13 years, I was in a special missions unit intelligence unit doing HUMINT for a whole host of folks, which was a cool experience. I did Iraq, Afghanistan, some trips down in South America. And then when I wasn't playing Army, I was a street cop in a mid-sized town in Central Texas. Did all the things, SWAT, narcotics, blah, 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 K9. And then I became a federal agent. I did that for 10 years and recently kind of left that whole scene and, kind of started a podcast, man, trying to put the good message out there. I think there's a lot of people hurting. I have a lot of friends that have some amazingly cool stories, man, but have also, suffered personally and some of them professionally as well. So yeah, man, we're just trying to, I'm just trying to put a bright message out in kind of a dark world, if you will.
Yeah, and that's one thing I wanted to jump into first was the podcast. So you just did your first episode with Dylan Truesdale, who it was a really good episode. For your first podcast, man, I mean, that it was a really good episode, and I wanted you to talk about that a little bit, and if you have stuff in the future, who you have coming on, if you can reveal that, or maybe what kind of stories you got coming on here soon.
Yeah, it's we hit a home run with Dylan. Dylan has a very unique story. That's a two-part interview. We're dropping the second part hopefully next week. Dylan was an Army Ranger. We got to go through all this cool military stuff, and now we're getting ready to go through his battle post-military, his transition, which is really hard for a lot of veterans and first responders. And that guy battled some real demons, and then he had a massive personal experience and physical loss that he has battled through and now just becoming a beast. So we're excited to get that message out as well. And then we have some real cool guests coming on down the road. Some we can talk about, some we can't, but we have some other former special operations guys that have done some really cool stuff, both personally and professionally. And then I have a federal agent that's coming on here, hopefully at the end of the month, who, yeah, man, that guy has done everything there is under the sun for the federal government, and told some stories that could be some Netflix documentaries. So we're super excited to have that coming up.
Yeah, and I'm excited for you, man. I can tell your podcast room there is it's set up. It looks professional. I mean, I'm on the road traveling right now, so I'm in a hotel room. But yeah, dude, you're set up. I encourage people to check it out because on your first episode, man, it was a home run because it looks very professional and it was a great story Dylan told. So yeah, guys, check out the Vanguard Wall podcast if you get a chance.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. I appreciate it.
So one of the reasons I brought you on, because this is a back pain podcast, back surgery, that type of stuff. You had a fusion in your neck several years back. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so when I was in Iraq, I was up in northern Mosul, and we were getting bombed pretty often. I was involved in just a couple tertiary incidents where we were getting banged around in vehicles, and I ended up getting a herniated disc in my neck. We went to try to go get it checked out. I had got all the classic symptoms. It was a C5, C6 herniation. So I lost complete feeling in my left hand. I lost all strength pretty much on, my whole left upper side of the body. I couldn't even press, push, do anything. It was pretty scary, actually. Ended up getting medevaced out of country. They tried to do a fusion in Landstuhl, Germany, and I fought it. I knew enough and had seen enough about fusions that I just know I didn't want it. No offense to anybody who's had it. I just knew that there was going to be some range of motion issues for me down the road. So I ended up getting a spinal injection in my neck, which was kind of painful. They bounced it off my spine. I think I had a new surgeon. So I ended up getting medevaced out of the country, and they sent me to a wounded warrior battalion where, again, they tried a couple more times to get me to do a fusion. They finally gave me a couple more injections and I got some relief. And I fought my way out of that whole situation, and ended up, going back on that deployment. And I still had like a lot of residual issues. I had a little bit of pain, but I still had like numbness and tingling in my fingers. And my strength was completely diminished. And, I lived like that for a couple years. I just really did not want to get a fusion. I had done a bunch of research about actual disc replacements. And I found some literature that they were using them a lot in Europe. And the device that I was looking at hadn't been approved by the FDA. But there had been two special operations guys, I think a Navy SEAL and somebody else that had gotten this type of surgery. And I had done a lot of research. The fusion, from what I could see, was going to be a 6 to 8 month recovery. But I also found a lot of literature that down the road, 5, 6 years, you were going to continue to have to get further fusions because it transfers that pressures down your spine. And so I had made this mental decision that no matter what, I wasn't going to get that. So I started working with the VA, and then there happened to be a local neurosurgeon who had trained with this particular disc, and they were doing some experimental stuff. I wrote my congressman a letter to get this surgery, and the VA ended up paying for it. And man, it was the best decision I ever made. So I ended up getting the surgery, and it was awesome, man. I mean, I think the rehab was minimal. I want to say I was back to work in less than 6 to 8 weeks with 90% range of motion. Because basically they basically just go in the front of your neck, clean everything out, pull your old disc out, put the other one, the disc in, screw it in, and that's it. I mean, you got to heal the scar and probably a little bit of the tissue, but man, in 6 weeks, I think 8 weeks at the most, I really don't remember, but I was back on the street working as a cop and full equipment. So I'm really glad that and I feel bad for the people that maybe don't have the time or just don't know the research, right? Like, we live in this society of Western medicine where we trust these doctors, and whatever they say, we do, good, bad, or indifferent. That's probably a whole nother podcast in and of itself. But yeah, so my fusion went well. I got really lucky.
Yeah, and I think it's natural to fight to not have the fusion. Like, I didn't want a fusion either. I went in thinking I was going to get a discectomy, and I woke up and they told me they fused it. That was it. It wasn't my knowledge going in I was going to get a fusion, but the doctor said it was just so compressed that he had no choice. And now I have no choice but to have a fusion. I got to try to make the most positive situation out of it as possible.
100%. I remember that. I remember that story very well. I actually tell your story quite often to other people.
Yeah, man, so I woke up and I didn't even know, like, when I was talking to my family on the phone. So it was during COVID, nobody was allowed in. And I didn't even know, like, so my mom works in a hospital. She's an MRI tech, and she's like, so what was the surgery? And I'm like, well, I think they just did, the discectomy. And, that's what I thought. And then one of the nurses came in, and I was talking to them, like, no, dude, you got a fusion. You know that, right? No, I didn't know that. So yeah, it was kind of a surprise, man, but I can't compare it to a discectomy, but I'm glad I got the fusion now, because it really saved my life. Because where I was at, I couldn't move. I was laying down all the time. Like, it's all I could do was lay down. I would stand there at work with a standing desk and type, and I would just pour with sweat. And I had fixed, disc herniations in the past with an inversion table. So I was just thinking, I'll fix it. No big deal. I'll fix it. I'll fix it. I'll fix it. And it got worse and worse and worse, to the point where I'm getting shocks down my left leg where it feels like, I was telling my wife, I wish they could cut my leg off. Like, when that happened, I would cry. I would sit there and cry. Like, she had never seen that from me. Like, dude, this guy is laying in bed crying because he's getting electric shocks down his leg. So, man, yeah, it's definitely something, man. But I feel like in the neck is a little bit different, because you said your healing process was only 6 to 8 weeks. So how was that process?
It was pretty uneventful. And, I think pain, right, is the biggest determination. I think I got really lucky. I had kind of been pain free. I had a lot of numbness and tingling. I didn't have the pain. And then I had twins that were born. And it just so happened that as my twins were being born, I spent the night in a hospital. And then the next day, I think I went to the chiropractor and the chiropractor cracked my neck. And that's when the pain became debilitating. And it just so happens that as all of that was happening, I got the approval to get the disc replacement. Because I can tell you the pain that I was in, had that disc replacement not been approved, I probably would have got the fusion. Because to your point, that pain when I mean, and unless you've had that pain, it's really hard to describe it, but it's debilitating. As far as my recovery, the recovery was pretty good. I had a phenomenal surgeon. And so I really just got lucky. This neurosurgeon had been doing different surgeries for a long time. He was a very professional surgeon. And I remember for the first week, I don't think I could do much. I think they were really worried about me lifting stuff, right? Just to make sure that the healing and everything scars, and no major jarring. But I remembered I recovered pretty quickly. I mean, because, basically you have this pain and you have this herniation that's sitting on the nerve. And once I came out of surgery, I remember I wasn't even in pain. Whatever they had fixed had killed my pain, and it wasn't really the medicine either. So yeah, the surgery or the recovery itself just was uneventful. I think I had to rest for a week or two, and then I slowly was able to pick up things. I think I couldn't lift anything more than 5 pounds for a week or 2 weeks, and then slowly just progressed. I think I had very minimal PT, to be honest with you.
So would you say you're 100% of what you were before the surgery? Because I know you do jujitsu, and you're very active. So I mean, what would you say? What's the impact in that segment right now?
I've even checked my range of motion. I would say I'm probably at 90 or 95%. I mean, I have full range of motion completely from my neck. I really don't have a lot of pain from it. I'm pretty religious on doing trigger point relief therapy on my own. I think that is a modality that's really helped for me to keep my neck free from impingements. But yeah, I mean, I would say I've recovered at 90 or 95%.
So you went to the chiropractor before, and that was kind of the last straw, and that was the same with me. So I'm kind of wondering, where are you at on chiropractics? Do you think it's a legit service, or do you think it's kind of like and I don't want you to tear anybody down and get sued, but where I'm at on it is I go there, I feel great like that day when I leave, and then the next day I'm back to where I was. So I'm not 100% a believer in chiropractics right now.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Without like naming anybody, or
Right.
I think it has its place. From my research I've done, and again, I'm no doctor or scholar. I've just used my own personal body. But when you're getting that cracking sensation, it releases some endorphins, and there is some research that you get some short-term relief. But I personally believe I trained with a physical therapist when I was a medic for a while on a national tactical team. And I learned a lot doing trigger point relief. I think a lot of times we focus on the musculoskeletal system, which is kind of what chiropractics does, instead of, your actual muscles. And there's a lot of research that shows, sometimes these trigger points can be relieved. And yeah, I'm just not a fan of chiropractors. And there is some studies out there. Well, not studies, but I mean, if you look, there's people that get killed by chiropractors, especially when you're letting them near your neck. I mean, it doesn't take much to break somebody's neck. And I can tell you I wasn't in pain in my neck. I just had some numbness and tingling. And when I saw that chiropractor and he cracked my neck, man, the pain that came on after that, and the days that followed was almost intolerable.
Yeah. The trigger point therapy. Tell me a little bit more about that. I haven't used that as kind of an alternative type kind of treatment. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about trigger point, because I've never used it.
So again, I think I've lived a pretty busy life, work hard, play hard, and I've been plagued with injuries, lower back injuries, neck injuries. I've had 2 shoulder reconstructions, 2 lower leg surgeries. And so I believe that if you go to Western medicine, if you go see a doctor, they're going to give you pain pills and you're going to get surgery eventually. And that's not a knock on the system. And I'm not saying don't take pain pills. And I'm not saying that surgery doesn't help. Surgery actually helped me. However, I got to the point where I just, I didn't want any more surgeries. And so I became a medic on a national tactical team, and I had to get continuing medical education hours. And I happen to live in a city where somebody else had screwed up the system in the hospital, and I wasn't allowed to go get there to train. So I ended up meeting a physical therapy doctor who I did jujitsu with. That I learned. I mean, I kind of trained under this guy for several years. Just kind of going in there, and not only was he fixing my own problems, I started referring people there, and that's kind of when I learned about trigger point modalities. And man, it has saved me, and it's probably saved at least 7 of my friends from surgery. Especially when you start talking about the lower back, there's so much going on, and in the lower spinal cord area, and that area is such a thick area. And I think sometimes MRIs, can get construed, or doctors get, you know, doctors don't make their money from patient visits. They make their money from surgeries. And again, I'm not saying surgeries aren't necessary. Sometimes you need them, dude. And yours obviously, relieve that pain. But trigger points, man, for me have been massive. I have a crushed vertebrae in my lower spine, as well as I had a herniated disc in my lower spine. And my back used to hurt so bad, I'd get out of bed and I'd fall on the ground. My daughter would have to come pick me up. I'd have a hard time walking. And it kind of came and went, and the VA wouldn't prescribe pain pills. And so I would just have to suffer for a couple days. Then I met Sander, this doctor, and I started learning about trigger point therapies. And I started learning that my particular issue was, especially with my lower disc herniations, and my spine was out of alignment. So, I also had found a guy named Naudi Aguilar, and Naudi has a company called Functional Patterns. So I learned first about trigger point therapy and kind of trigger point relief from this Functional Patterns guy. And then that really helped me. And so when I met Sander, and Sander started talking about the trigger point therapy, I was already kind of tuned in, and he kind of really just dialed it back. So for me, my trigger points were in my hip flexors and right in my lower, butt cheeks, dude. And I learned how to use a lacrosse ball to not only relieve my trigger points in my hip flexors, but also, in my butt, man. And it cured most of my back pain.
So trigger points basically about it's not going right to the symptom, but like finding out what the actual problem is, treat the tree and not the leaf kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. And I got injured. It's kind of how I stumbled into Sanders. I ended up was doing jujitsu, didn't tap soon enough, busted my shoulder. And I thought for sure I'd already had a shoulder reconstruction. So I thought I had, blown my shoulder out. I go see him. I couldn't move my arm up. I couldn't do anything. I thought for sure. And in less than 40 minutes, that dude had given me probably 90% range of motion back, and he kept me doing jujitsu, which, is kind of contradictory to, you see these doctors, you sprain your ankle, twist your knee, whatever. And it's like, hey, rest it, ice it, and don't do anything for 6 weeks. I mean, this guy was the opposite. And, kind of what I started learning about trigger points is you get these, balls in your muscle that affect blood flow and kind of can turn your muscles off and all these different things. And, you can turn that stuff back on. The other thing he really helped me with is my mattress. I had just bought like this $7,000 Tempur-Pedic mattress, and I don't think we'd had it for 2 weeks. So we had kind of progressed in our sessions, and I wasn't getting past a certain point, and I think he was frustrated, and we had befriended each other at this point. So he actually came to my house and looked at my mattress and said, "Your mattress sucks." And I was like, he was just very matter of fact about it. I'm like, man, I just spent $7,000. Like, I don't care. And we ended up going to 3 different mattress places, and he helped me find a mattress. And he kind of taught me about mattress coils and all this stuff I didn't think about, but we got a much firmer mattress, and man, that's also made a difference. It took a little bit of adjustment. And kind of what he explained is that, if you have a soft mattress and, your mattress dips like a Tempur-Pedic, it can, as you dip in the mattress, it's literally pulling your spine out of alignment. So when you wake up, your spine's kind of out of alignment, and that's why you have to stretch and do all these things especially if you struggle with chronic back pain. So that's made a massive difference for me as well.
So you went to a firmer mattress to kind of keep your spine in alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look in Southeast Asia, and Japan and China, they don't struggle with some of the back problem issues that we have, because they sleep on extremely hard surfaces. If you see an older person in their 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, and they're hunched over, they're walking, it's not old age. It's a lifetime of trigger points that haven't been relieved. Case in point, after my neck surgery, I did have a little bit of residual numbness and tingling, and my tricep didn't fully engage. And I thought that was just par for the course for the surgery. When I
Hmm.
saw Sander and he went to fix my shoulder, he actually fixed my neck as well, and he turned my tricep muscle back on. So for like 9 years, I just thought, it was just a par for the course for surgery. I had a trigger point near my neck that he released, and it literally turned my tricep back on, and I lost all my numbness and tingling. Pretty crazy.
Wow, dude, that's something I need to do some research on. Is this trigger point stuff? I have heard about it a little bit on podcasts and read a little bit about it, but yeah, what you're telling me right now is this is like it's something that we're definitely neglecting. Is we always try to treat the symptom. Oh, my back hurts. What must be right here in your back when really it's tight muscles or something you could do in another spot, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I learned a lot from him too. How the heat is super important. Like, we always hear you get an injury in ice, ice, ice. I think ice helps to numb the pain, but heat is what draws blood to the area and to help heal, that injury, which totally makes sense. That's why you have bruising. Bruising is when you get an injury and tons of blood comes to the injury site, to help heal that injury.
Gotcha. Tell me more about the crushed vertebrae. You know how that happened?
No, I don't, man. I trained a lot with my unit, my military unit. We deployed a lot, and so we would do constant training. We did a lot of vehicle mobility training, and we did a lot of car crash training where you would, drive through cars and smash cars, and there would be times you'd have to get hit in a car. So I would imagine that's part of it. And then when I was a police officer, I was running code to an incident and stopped at a red light, thought it was cleared, and went into the intersection and just got smashed by another car. So I would imagine it was one of those car wrecks for sure.
And one thing you mentioned military. One thing I wanted to follow up on was the VA. You hear nightmares about the VA. How have they been for you without trying to without getting sued? Like how has it been?
The VA is it's an interesting place. I think there's great people that work at the VA, but it's the government, man. And it's free healthcare for a reason. I think it's really hit and miss. I've been in some places, I've moved around a little bit. There's some VAs that are phenomenal, and there's some that they just suck. And again, you know, for the doctors, you're not always going to get the best doctors. They don't pay, eventually you're capped by a government salary. So, if you could make $500,000 in the real world, why would you do it for $200,000 at the VA? And so I don't want to disparage the VA again, because I think there's a lot of great people that work there, but it's definitely a flawed system for sure.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with like workman's comp and even in the private sector where they just jerk you around until you've had this injury for weeks before you're allowed to see anybody, and it's all about capitalism, right? The doctor can't make money on that, so you're just getting pushed back and pushed back.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I tell people all the time, you have to be your own advocate. We live in a day and age where, there's so much information at your fingertips, almost overwhelmingly, right? You can get pulled in different directions, but be your own advocate. It's called the practice of medicine for a reason. If you go to your doctor and you think he has all the answers, you're misinformed about how medicine works. Half the time they're relying off what you tell them and your previous history. And then, if you're in the private sector, they got to see so many patients a day to keep the lights on. You get 10, 15 minutes, and they're on to the next. And so you have to advocate for yourself, know what your condition is, know what else is available, and be your own advocate.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you got to be your own advocate, and you got to give them all the information too, because like you said, they have a limited amount of information. They have a chart there, and then they have a few symptoms you're giving them, and if you're hesitant to tell them exactly what's going on, that could really impact you for the rest of your life because they're going to make some choice based on not all the information. So yeah, sometimes it's the doctor's fault, sometimes it's your fault for not speaking up too.
100%.
um the crushed vertebrae. So we've talked in the past about different things you've tried, and I know you've done hyperbarics. How has that helped you?
Oh man, that I think that's something that's completely overlooked. I actually own a hyperbaric chamber. I bought it probably 3, 4 years ago. It was a $5,900 investment. I wrote it off of my taxes as a medical device, and man, I can tell you, it's the fountain of youth. It's just oxygen, so there's no fancy, there's nothing fancy. There's very few contraindications for it. Consult with your medical professional if you're interested in using it. But it's essentially adding extra oxygen to your body, which can speed recovery. The actual term is called hyperbaric oxygen therapy, HBOT, and you can Google HBOT and all kinds of different things, and you'll find peer-reviewed research, medical research. They use them. It's been used not only in the United States, but Israel's used them quite heavily. And there's tons of research that can help with injury recovery. Like for instance, I'll get tattoos and stay the night in a hyperbaric chamber. It'll seal my tattoo overnight. It's really helped my lower back. I ended up getting stem cells, which is another great, non-traditional approach. And I use my hyperbaric chamber in conjunction with my stem cells, which I haven't had back pain at all since I got that. But as far as hyperbaric oxygen therapy, it's phenomenal, man. I think I also use a sauna and a cold plunge as well. I'm into all that stuff. I think there's tons of studies on it. And again, if you use Western medicine as an anchor for your issues, you're going to get surgery or pain pills eventually. That's just kind of how it works. And I just didn't want those things anymore. I didn't want to be on any medication. And I really didn't want to get surgery, especially in my back. My back pain, obviously wasn't as debilitating as yours, Mark. But it was just a constant nag. And I got tired of it. So I just did some aggressive, non-traditional means, and it's really paid off for me.
Yeah, and I had that constant nag in my lower back since my late teens, early 20s. And every once in a while, I would get the herniated disc or the slip disc, and where you're just walking with real tiny steps, and I would take care of that with the inversion table. And then this last time, it just, I'll get it. I'll hang more on the inversion table. It just got worse and worse, dude.
Well, and I think once the disc gets slipped and that fluid gets on that nerve, sometimes you can do the inversion table to pull the spine apart for it to go back, but sometimes it can get all the way out. And yeah, man, that pain is real. That's a real thing.
Yeah, dude. With your hyperbaric chamber, is it like a negative pressure chamber where it's forcing the oxygen in, or are you wearing the nasal cannula, or what
yeah, both. So you're wearing a nasal cannula, right? You're hooked the oxygen, the hyperbaric chamber is hooked to both an air compressor and an oxygen concentrator that runs into the tube, and it's just a big long tube. So the tube fills up, it gets to pressure. I don't know the exact pressure, but it's as far as your ears, it's like you're flying on an airplane, so you'll have to clear your ears a couple times, and then you're wearing a nasal cannula, or you can wear a nasal cannula, or you can wear a mask. I just wear the nasal cannula, but yeah, it's forcing that oxygen into your tissues via the pressure. So you're actually breathing in oxygen, and it's also forcing oxygen into your tissues. Kind of similar to that, Lance Armstrong was blood doping. He would pull his blood out and put his own blood back in. And my understanding of why he was doing that is to get extra oxygen in his blood, because there is a healing property to it. And yeah, I mean, my wife ran a 26-mile marathon, stayed the night in the hyperbaric chamber, and woke up the next day like she'd never run. My daughter had a boxer fracture in her hand. I stuck her in there for 4 or 5 straight days, and it fused a bone. I had a heart surgery where they were placing a stent, and the doctor nicked my radial artery in my forearm, and they wanted to do a forearm fasciotomy. Fought my way out of the ICU after the stent placement, stayed the night in the hyperbaric chamber, and it sealed my artery. Like, yeah, that thing's pretty magical, man.
So we're talking about when we walk around and breathe, it's like 21% oxygen. But when you're in that chamber, is it 100%? Is it 99? It's somewhere in there, right?
Mark, that's a good question, and I don't want to say the wrong answer. I definitely know it's definitely forcing a much higher oxygen concentration. I know it's working because I'll put a pulse ox on my finger, and I'm normally sitting around 98%, and every time I put the pulse ox on in there, it's 100%, which is probably the only place that I ever get 100% oxygen. But I don't know. I don't know. I'll actually get back to you on that though, because now I'm curious myself.
Gotcha. As far as the stem cells, I mean, we talked about it a little bit before. We want to keep it general, but what was that process like as far as time frame from how your pain was when you went in, got the injection, and how it progressed?
Yeah, and I think for me to tell you that too, I kind of need to tell you the overall story. I looked into stem cells for 6 to 7 years. At the time when I first started looking into them, I was looking into them for somebody else, and then I got super curious. They were being done in, I think, Colombia, Panama, and then somewhere in the Caribbean. It was extremely expensive, like $15,000 to $30,000. But I know that there was UFC fighters and NFL players. And I actually listened to Mel Gibson on Joe Rogan's podcast. He had taken his dad down there and just ranted and raved about it. I didn't obviously have $30,000. So last year I happened to be at some kind of working lunch meeting and happened to be sitting next to this guy who is a, retired F-117 pilot. We just start chit chatting about what each other does. He tells me that he's working with this medical company that does stem cells. Well, I didn't think you could do that in the US. So I thought he was talking about PRP. And I said, yeah, I don't want PRP. I've had that. He's like, no, they're mesenchymal stem cells. And I was like, really? I said, where are you doing those at? He said, well, we're doing them in Houston right now. And I said, well, I don't have $30,000. And I think he said, no, they're like $6,000 or $6,500. And I was like, what? So that was a Thursday, and I was there Monday morning in Houston, ready to go because I already knew, there's just a lot of research. There are some controversial thoughts, but again, I think there's a risk with anything. So the risk to me was worth the reward. So in South America, they do a lot of the stem cell injections pinpoint. So if you have back pain, they'll inject them into your back. If you have knee pain, they inject them into your knee pain. When I went to this particular place, they just injected into your blood with the thought process being that your body is going to put them where you need them. I think you and I had talked yesterday that, from my understanding of the body, it's kind of this neuro highway, right? And sometimes you may have lower back pain, but the source of your pain for me, like, is my hip flexors. So I feel the pain in my back, but it's my hip flexors that are off that are actually pulling my spine out of alignment. So I opted, with hey man, just throw it in I think I got like 3 million mesenchymal stem cells. The company does a real good about screening where they're getting them from, et cetera, et cetera. And, the first day, I think I expected some kind of narcotic effect, like I just took this drug, like, let me feel it. And I didn't really feel anything. I went in the hyperbaric chamber for a couple days and then I just stopped thinking about it, to be honest with you. And I remember waking up like 8 days later. I'm like, man, I haven't had back pain in like 8 or 9 days. And honestly, man, I just haven't had a lot of pain since then. So yeah, they're another fountain of youth type thing.
Yeah, stem cells, I know, gained a lot of traction on Joe Rogan's podcast when he talks to the UFC fighters. All of them go to South America and get this stuff done. Whether it be, pre-fight, post-fight, whatever it is, to cure whatever ails them. And I don't know how often you can get it done, but it seems like it is the fountain of youth and people are using it quite a bit, but you got to have the money. Like you're saying, it can be costly.
Yeah, and for me, dude, I think I put it on a credit card. It was one of those things. I had done enough research to know what it was, and it wasn't attainable. And man, once it got within my grasp, I was ready. And again, man, I don't have a lot of money. Again, I put it on a credit card and ended up paying off later. But it's, we'll make all these purchases, buy boats and all these, all these different things, and go on trips, but we won't take care of ourselves and our body. And I think, for me, I was like, my back pain was starting to sneak up on me a little bit. The trigger point therapy was helping, but man, I was just tired of it. It becomes this nagging thing. I have young kids and I'm older and I want to be able to still hang with them. And that nagging back pain was keeping me from doing stuff. So for me, it was worth every penny for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's another thing to look into. I know you got to roll. I got to roll here soon. One thing I wanted to finish up with you is mental health, because this back pain stuff, even the nagging pain, like that nagging pain, it takes so much of your focus away. Like I wouldn't, if I had that nagging pain right now and you were talking to me, I would be hearing maybe half of what you're saying, because it's just like, I don't even care. I don't even care. Like my back fucking hurts. Right. So, and I've had it where my back pain was so debilitating. Like I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to see anybody. Like that's all I could think about, man. And I know like people are hurting right now. You can't afford groceries. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on in the world right now. And I know, people who have committed suicide or people who know people. And it's really like, it's really a scourge to society right now, man. And I guess my message is, especially with jobs like we've had in the past, like law enforcement jobs, like you got to let some things slide. Like you can't take everything personal. I know we've both been attacked, shot at, knives, all that kind of stuff. You can't take that stuff personal. You got to be able to separate and compartmentalize things. And I was wondering what your message was to the viewers out there about mental health? Because I know you've been through a lot of stuff.
Yeah, man, that's a great topic, man. And I really appreciate you for having the guts to talk about it, right? And I look at mental health in rings, your close in ring and then your outer ring. Mental health, I think, one, it affects you, right? And then immediately it affects your family, especially if you have kids or a wife, fiance, girlfriend. When you're not the best version of yourself, you're not only the best version of yourself for yourself, but also you can end up becoming a nightmare, and mental health can destroy relationships. So it's super important, right? And I would say, you got to start from within. And pain, pain's a horrible thing, right? But it's not the end all be all. A lot of times, we overthink pain in our head. And I'm not saying like pain's not real, but pain it's actually your brain telling your body that you're hurting, not your body telling your brain that it's hurting. And so it's finding ways to interrupt that feedback loop. Cold water and cold tank immersion therapy is extremely helpful. Not only does it help numb pain, but also forces you to rewire your brain for the way you think. I know for me personally, when I get in the cold tank, I usually I'm around 39 or 40 degrees. I have to almost meditate while I'm in there because it's sometimes the cold water hurts a little bit. But I've been able to interrupt even that feedback loop by meditating, by breathing. So I think like mental health starts there, right? Finding a modality, whether it's yoga, church, religions definitely help me. I definitely believe in God. And then, finding that meditation piece or whatever the thing is. What I would say to avoid, and what I personally did for a while is, you can start popping pills or you can start drinking. And alcohol becomes a poison in both your personal life and to your immediate circle. And then, past your immediate circle, as you kind of expand out, surround yourself with good, positive people too. I think that is often overlooked in mental health. I think finding the right people, having positive, supportive people in your life, especially when you're constantly dealing with pain, that can help you find other modalities, deep tissue massage, whatever, man. Um, you know, Surrounding yourself with good people and staying positive and being positive and really taking control of your life. I think sometimes too, I know in the veteran community, there's a lot of people that are guilty of just wanting help or, why can't somebody help me? It's like nobody's coming to save you, man. It's up to you. And I think that's often lost just in the world, especially as this day and age where we're on social media and we have all these things at our fingertips. We don't have to really work hard to get certain things. You can kind of get this mindset, well, I want somebody to help or, give me. Whereas, hey man, put on your rucksack, dude, tighten those straps. Life sucks sometimes, right? Get over the pity party and work through it and, start helping yourself. And then once you learn how to help yourself, you can learn how to help other people as well. I think that's a big thing with your podcast. I mean, look at you, what you've overcome. I remember, hearing the story of you having to, your dad renting that mattress and you, driving back on that mattress in the back of the car. I just remember thinking about that, thinking, oh my God, how horrible was that? But now, you've started this journey where you've made this, you have this podcast now where you're helping people, right? And that's what it's about. I think so often we're always asking, hey, what can the world do for me instead of what can we do for the world? That's kind of why we started our podcast as well. Mental health is a big reason why, because I think, the world's hurting. So turn off those outside distractions. If you're in pain a lot and, you're watching negative feedback from the news every day, like turn that off, man. That's one thing. And just focus on, being the best version of yourself you can every day. That was kind of a long-winded response. Sorry about that.
No, that was a great message. And the society we live in is kind of gimme, gimme, gimme with the entitlements and stuff going up. I mean, it just seems like we're handing out more things just to shut people up instead of people actually solving the problems. So, yeah, no, it was a great answer, man. And seriously, your podcast is going to take off. Like your first pod, I can't even believe how professional it looked and the story. And man, it was a home run on the first podcast, dude. So I'm really excited to see how that progresses, man. And yeah, I appreciate you coming on because I haven't seen you in years, dude. And this has been.
Well, I'll leave this for your listeners. The whole reason I have a podcast is because of you, bro. I mean, that's the whole reason I did it. You and I talked about it for the last 2 years on and off. And so you motivated me. So I'll forever appreciate that. And I really appreciate your friendship.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that, brother. And I want to have you on more. And yeah, let's hook up again soon, dude.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. And I appreciate everybody for watching.